Welcome to the Opus training videos. This video covers the waitlist. This video will cover 6 waitlist topics: adding a student to the waitlist, viewing students on a waitlist, dropping from a waitlist, swapping onto a waitlist, waitlist into classes that have related class sections, and auto-enroll from waitlist to class enrollment. To start, click on Manage Student Enrollment. Then click on Student Schedule/Enrollment on the left. Then click on Quick Enroll a Student. Then you need to search for your student and click on the Add button. Select the Enroll action if necessary, and either enter the class number or click the magnifying glass to search for a class. Enter your search criteria and uncheck the Show Open Classes Only box. The only classes that can be waitlisted are closed classes, so in order to show closed classes, this box needs to be unchecked. You will then see all the classes that match your criteria. Any of the classes that have a yellow triangle under status are those on the waitlist. To place a student on the waitlist for that class, click on the Select button. In order to be placed on the waitlist for that class, you will need to check the Waitlist OK box on the Class Overrides tab and then click the Submit button. You can then click on Messages to read the message regarding the waitlist. The message text will either say that the student has been placed on the waitlist and given a position number, or that the student was not placed on the waitlist. Things that would prevent a student from being on a waitlist are requisites not met for the class, instructor or department consent required for the class, or a hold on an account, etc. There are several ways to view students on a waitlist. One way is to click on the Study List link on the Quick Enroll panel. You should then be able to see if the student's on a waitlist. A second way is to start at the home page, click on Manage Courses and Classes, then click on Rosters and Schedules, and then View Class Roster. You would then have to fill in the criteria, hit the search button, and then you will see the class roster. You can then change the enrollment status to All or just Waitlists to see the students on the waitlist. A second way is to start at the home page and click on Manage Student Enrollment, then click on Student Schedule/Enrollment, and then View Student Academic Summary. You would then have to fill in the criteria, hit the search button, and then you should see the student information. And lastly, you can use the enrollment summary that's found in the Navigator tool in the upper right-hand corner under Records and Enrollment Summaries. Dropping from a waitlist is very similar to adding to a waitlist, but the action should be set to drop. You would then put in the class number or hit the magnifying glass to search for the class. If you do use the search feature, you want to make sure you're looking for those classes with a status of waiting. Once you find the class you're trying to drop, click on its checkmark. Then click the Submit button. You should then see a success message, meaning that the student was successfully dropped from the waitlist. Swapping onto a waitlist is also similar to adding to a waitlist. The only real differences are the action needs to be swap, then you need to put in the class you're swapping from, and then the class that you're swapping into. Remember, if you're going to search for a class, you need to uncheck the box that shows Open Classes Only. You will then see all the classes that match your criteria. Any of the classes that have a yellow triangle under status are those on the waitlist. To place a student on the waitlist for that class, click on the Select button. In order to be placed on the waitlist for that class, you will need to check the Waitlist OK box on the Class Overrides tab and then click the Submit button. There may be a class you need to enroll a student in that has a related class section that you need to enroll them in as well. An example of this is a chemistry lecture and its associated lab. In the example to the right, the student might select the first chemistry lecture, Class 2405, and then lab section LA2, Class 2411. The chemistry lecture selected has an open status, and the lab selected has a waitlist status. When you complete the student's enrollment, he will be placed on a waitlist for both the lecture and the lab. This is because in order for a student to be enrolled in the combined lecture and lab, both the lecture and lab must be open. If either one of them have a waitlist status, the student will be placed on the waitlist for both. Waitlist treats the lecture and lab as a single enrollment, and in order to be enrolled successfully in both, they both must have an open status. This holds true if the situation were reversed. If the student had chosen a lecture that had a status of waitlist, and then selected a lab that was open, he would be placed on a waitlist for both the lecture and the lab. The auto-enroll from waitlist is a process that automatically moves a student from a waitlist to enrollment in a class. Emory will have set times throughout the enrollment period when this process will run. When seats become available in a class that a student is on a waitlist for, then auto-enroll will evaluate each student on that class list based upon their waitlist position number. The student with the waitlist position number 1 will be evaluated first. Student with the waitlist position number 2 will be evaluated second, and so on. When auto-enroll evaluates a student for an available seat in a waitlisted class, and it is found to have enrollment errors, like time conflicts, then that student will be notified that they were not moved from the waitlist to enrollment in the class, and the student with the next waitlist number will be evaluated. Regarding classes that have related class sections, auto-enroll will move a student from the waitlist to enrollment in the class only if both the class and the related class section have seats available. When auto-enroll successfully moves a student from a waitlist to enrollment, the student's class schedule will now show those formerly waitlisted classes as enrolled classes. Here's what a sample class list would look like before the auto-enroll. Notice that all 3 classes are waitlisted. Here's what that same class list would look like after the auto-enroll. Notice all 3 classes are now enrolled. The auto-enroll from waitlist process will process lecture components and their corresponding lab components according to their key structure or order of the class TBL, which is the course ID, the course offering number, term, session code, and class section. Because of this, students with a higher waitlist position number may actually be moved from waitlist to enrollment before students with a lower waitlist position number. For example, a class, Chem 141, has both lectures and labs. As you can see on the screen, there's a Lecture 1, a Lecture 2, and a Lab A, and all 3 are currently closed. Now John is waitlisted in Lecture 2 and Lab A. His waitlist positions in both of those are position number 1. Now Mary is waitlisted in Lecture 1 and Lab A. Her waitlist positions for Lecture 1 is position number 1, but for Lab A, it's position number 2. So a decision is made to increase class capacity by 1 student for both lectures and the lab. Now both lectures and the lab each have 1 open enrollment slot. When the auto-enroll from waitlist process runs, Mary will get those open enrollment slots and be moved from waitlist to enrollment in her lecture and lab, but John will not, even though John has a lower waitlist position for the lab than Mary does. Since auto-enroll processing order is based upon the class TBL key, the classes will be processed in the following order. First, Lecture 1 will be processed with a section of 000, then Lecture 2 will be processed with section 001, and then Lab A, section LA1. Since Mary is waitlisted in Lecture 1, she will be processed before John. Auto-enroll will check to see if there is an open slot in Lecture 1, section 000, and also an open slot in Lab A. Since there is now an open slot in both of these components, Mary will be moved from waitlist to enrollment for both Lecture 1 and Lab A, even though her waitlist position in Lab A was number 2. Once auto-enroll is finished processing Lecture 1, it will move to the next section, Lecture 2, section 001. Now it is John's turn to be processed since he is waitlisted in Lecture 2. There's an open slot now in Lecture 2, but unfortunately the open slot in Lab A was taken by Mary, and therefore John will not be moved from the waitlist to enrollment in the lecture and lab, even though he was waitlist position number 1 on the lab. Remember, waitlist treats both the lecture and the lab like a single unit. A student can only be moved from waitlist to enrollment if both the lecture and lab have an open enrollment slot. Consequently, John will remain waitlisted for both the lecture and the lab and will not be reevaluated again until additional slots open up in both. Here are some additional waitlist notes. If a class has been set up for waitlisting and the class has reached its enrollment capacity and closes, it will become available for waitlisting. Students may add themselves to a waitlist during pre-registration enrollment. However, enrollments from the waitlist do not occur until open enrollment begins. A closed class with an active waitlist will not change from closed to open status during pre-registration, even if the enrollment capacity is changed. The class remains closed. When open enrollment begins and the auto-enroll function runs, waitlist students will be given priority for enrollment. When a student is moved from waitlist to enrollment in a class, all other students on the waitlist for that class will move up in the queue. When auto-enroll is processing a waitlist, if a student does not meet criteria for the class, the student with the next waitlist position number will be processed. Students cannot get on a waitlist until their enrollment appointment date arrives or open enrollment has begun. When a waitlisted class has reached its waitlist capacity, the waitlist feature becomes unavailable and the blue closed class icon will display for the class status. Students can waitlist for multiple sections of the same course. If they become enrolled in any other section of that course, then they will be removed from any waitlist that they may be on for other sections of that course. This is the case regardless of the method of enrollment, whether auto-enroll, self-service enrollment, enrollment request, quick enroll, block enrollment, etc. Time conflicts for a class are not checked when a student is added to a waitlist. The time conflict will be checked when auto-enroll attempts to move the student from waitlists to enrollment. When swapping a student from one class to another, a student can only swap from a class they are enrolled in. They cannot swap from a waitlisted class. A swap can only be made into a class with a waitlist. If a waitlisted class has a seat become available and auto-enroll is unable to move any students from the waitlist to enrollment into the class to fill that seat, then the class status will automatically be changed to open. If a student is enrolled in a lecture and lab and wishes to waitlist into a different lab but keep the same lecture, that student will be dropped from their lecture and placed at the front of the same lecture's waitlist, ahead of all other students while they wait for a seat to open in the lab. That student will be given position number 1 on the waitlist for the same lecture. Students already on the waitlist for the lecture will see their waitlist position numbers increase because of the previously enrolled student being placed at the front of the waitlist queue. Internally, PeopleSoft assigns a position number of 0 to that student, but the student would never see that 0. They would see a waitlist position number of 1. If another student enrolled in that same lecture also waitlists into a different lab, but chooses to keep the same lecture, then they will also be assigned an internal waitlist position number of 0. Resulting in now 2 students having an internal waitlist position number 0. Each student, though, would see a waitlist position of 2. If there is 1 student with an internal position number of 0, then they will see a waitlist position number of 1. If there are 2 students with an internal position number of 0, then they will both have a waitlist position number of 2. If there are 3 students, then all 3 of them will have a waitlist position number of 3, and so on. This appears to be a quirk with PeopleSoft. Fortunately, even though there may be 1 or more students on the waitlist with an internal position number of 0, auto-enroll will process these students correctly along with all other students on the class waitlist. Being placed on a waitlist does not guarantee enrollment in the class. There may be circumstances that result in a student's waitlist position number changing from time to time. It is important to remember that position numbers are also not a guarantee of enrollment in the class.